So after the demo of ActionBlocks at work, let's just give an overview of what ActionBlocks can do. In the library, ActionBlocks introduces 4 components that designers can use for interactivity. The brain is the most important one. Number variable and timer have already been demonstrated in the previous demonstration. Then there's of course the text variable, which will contain text. Each of the latter 3 can be made invisible, and they probably will always be invisible in a finished product, but for testing purposes it's often useful to have them visible. So when I use this little check mark, you see an icon here change, and now these 3 items will not be visible at runtime, but they will work. You see here extra peaches being caused by the timer, and here we've seen the peach count still being maintained. Okay, but the brain is the interesting thing, and in its user interface we see an incredibly long list of possible events that you could respond to. There's a next version of ActionBlocks on the way. This is really an alpha version. The next version will have a redesigned user interface where you don't get an intimidating list of events to respond to, but you start out with a blank event list where you add only those events that you're interested in for your particular movie clip, and you can reorder them if you want to. The graphic design and the user interface will be really changed in the next version. So this is rather preliminary. Quick overview of the events. The mouse events are the usual ones, but there's another set of 4 down here where a movie clip can respond to mouse events that happen to its subclicks. For example, the game over screen was responding to the click on the OK button in order to make itself disappear. We don't want just the OK button to disappear, so the entire dialog needs to respond to the click on the OK button. That's what those events are for. We have key events. Sorry for these are still visible, but you can add here extra key events for example, the usual well-known keys used in computer games, and add commands to them, or simply respond to any key being pressed. Sorry, just remove these. Sorry. Movie clips in their lifetime will have a point where they're created. You can have some commands being executed then, similar to when a movie clip ends. Or if your application is running at 24 frames per second, for example, this event will allow you to execute code 24 times each second, which is useful, for example, physics effect like gravity, or checking on conditions that are not built-in events, but still require some kind of response. You can have collision detection, but collision detection is really weak in ActionScript 2 and therefore also in ActionBlocks. We're working on a rather better version in the next version. Signals are like messages in Scratch. We call them signals in order to convey that they can't carry any extra information. We're still wondering about whether we should have messages with parameters or stuff like that, but we're really a bit careful about that, so that's going to be the subject of an experiment. The check variables is one that was demonstrated. We included that because many game rules and business logic rules are framed in terms of when a value reaches some kind of specific value. For example, when the player scores 50 points, then this and this happen, or when the health of the player is down to 0, then that and that will happen. So we wanted to have a really natural way of implementing such logic. We've already discussed these four. Respond to timers we've seen, drag and drop support, and support for cue points in video, which will allow you to respond to specific time markers that can be embedded in video files. Okay, so when you add commands, then you choose from a list. And this is the list of the commands that are available in this version of ActionBlocks. We have commands for manipulating the playback of the timeline. If your animation, if you have a complex timeline or an animation in your movie clip, then you can stop the animation or skip frames or start playing again. Creating new clips, removing clips, sending signals later, and this is sending a signal, and this is sending a signal later, which is our implementation of a one-off timer. The timer component will repeat itself, but this one will simply elapse once and then send its signal. There are ways to start animations from programming, and the interesting thing about this is of course the fact that you can use formulas in all kinds of values to control the duration of the animation or the destination of a movement or whatever. Change rotation, transparency, scale, position. Drag and drop can be started. Dragging can be constrained horizontally, vertically, or just free and limited to, for example, a specific movie clip. And oh, sorry about this. This is not the screen where we want to be. We want to be here. These are commands to change visual properties such as position, rotation, alpha, but at once instead of through an animation with a duration. Changing number variables, changing text variables, doing all kinds of things with sound, changing volumes, manipulating these timer components if you want to, debugging strings, and this one is interesting because it shows another feature. It's called the if panel. All ActionBlocks, not just this one, but all ActionBlocks will allow an if panel, which makes their execution dependent on some kind of condition. We didn't want to have nested if then else structures because we don't think our students are comfortable with that kind of construction like thinking. So this is our solution for conditionals. And funny enough, this version of ActionBlocks does actually seem to work for our design students. They have already built a number of interesting projects with ActionBlocks, and they take to it rather naturally. They don't get much training in using ActionBlocks, almost none at all, and they have no training in programming whatsoever. The closest thing they'll probably have got to programming a computer is some basic Excel stuff, and but they do manage to get rather interesting interactive applications with ActionBlocks. So we're interested in what they'll do with the next version. One thing that really helps is that we've designed these brains to work well together on the timeline. You can have different brains on the timeline at different points in time, which is a really natural way to implement, for example, finite state machines, and or you can have multiple brains active for a single movie clip at the same time. That will work too, and that turns into a really natural workflow for designers, where they can build the graphics and structure their Flash application, and only then start adding interactivity. So this is all the time that YouTube is giving me, sorry.